Hello and welcome to Quilt Addicts Anonymous. I'm Stephanie Soebbing. Today is a Stashin with Stephanie Day where we go over a brand new fat quarter friendly pattern that we've designed just to go with the fabric line that we brought in for our subscription club, Stashin with Stephanie. So if you haven't heard of the program, what we do is we send out 12 fat quarters for the price of 10 every month. We've designed a brand new pattern that's inspired by those fabrics and works perfectly with it. And then you also get access to that pattern for free. Every other pattern that we have designed for the Stashin with Stephanie program, which is over a $200 value now. And then you also get a coupon code for $10 off a $20 purchase or 25% off, whichever works better for you, that you can use to get additional fabric to go with the fabric bundle that you've got, so you can get a finishing kit or just more yardage if you have something else in mind. This month we are working with Kismet by Valerie Wells for Free Spirit. I brought in her first collection, Murmur, with Free Spirit. That was her first collection back with them. And that was about a year ago. You guys really loved it. We did a different project with it. And that project was a remaking of one of our older patterns, Rainbow Layer Cake, and it uses a 10-inch square pack and a jelly roll to create this really cool, no neutral diamond quilt. And so it just kind of like just kind of goes down from colorway to colorway, and it is a really neat way to just sort of have it waterfall down in that rainbow color. But that one can be a little bit challenging. It's one of our more popular patterns, but you have to be able to get a layer cake and a jelly roll the same line, and sometimes that's hard to find. Some don't even make those. And so what we did with this one is we fat quarterfied the pattern. So the numbers are a little bit different for what we're cutting and what size it turns out being in the end, but the overall feeling of it is still there. It looks very similar. It also is a little bit easier to lay out because we end up with equal numbers of the two different types of diamonds that we're going to be making. So it's a little easier to get your rows laid out and everything put together. So we're going to go over how to do everything in today's video and how to get those perfect points. But the measurements and everything you need for this are available in the pattern. If you're a member, you can get that for free. It is called Rainbow Frosting to go with our Rainbow Layer Cake, and because they're both in the same family. And rainbow frosting is very fun to make if you haven't done it before. Look up Cupcake Gemma. You will not be disappointed if you do decorate your cupcakes with that next time. But so anyway, back to quilting. We are going to go through all that today. You can download the pattern Rainbow Frosting over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. We also will have kits available while supplies last. So check that all out. Let's take a little bit closer look at the fabric and then we'll get started quilting. I really love Valerie Wells. We had her first collection back with Free Spirit last year, Murmur, and Kismet ties in really nicely with that one. So if you're a fan of hers and you have some fabric still, this will definitely work with that. It's got a nice collection of prints and then also wovens, which you can use in quilts. They also work really well in garments. And this one, the elephant, is the big main feature of it, and it is really cute. We are not going to fussy cut this for this month's pattern. Sometimes we'll get the head, sometimes we'll get the elephant butt, and that's okay. It's just going to be an elephant roaming around on the quilt. It'll be adorable. And this one would make a really fun border or binding. It'd be really, really cute. And then we have this fun ribbon texture. This one kind of reminds me of one of the original Tula Pink True Colors prints. I think that's really fun. And then this one does a really great job of melding everything together. We've got that diamond print that we just looked at. We have the ribbons, we have some of the mandalas, and the colors are just a good mixture of everything as a nice hero print. Another woven. And then we have a little bit smaller scale elephant as we move into the blue colorway. Some nice greens in combination with this one. We've got the elephants again on the large scale. A nice, very pretty powder blue woven. And then we're getting into mixing some of the colors in the mandalas. Another woven. And then that diamond print again, but in that darker blue finish. And then this is the Bring It All Together print, but in the blue colorway. And lastly, we have this fun intersecting ribbon. It's really pretty. That would be cool as a quilting pattern as well. So essentially, we're going to have some fat strips and some skinny strips, and those measurements are all available in your pattern instructions to go along with this video tutorial. And you can get that over on our website, shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. It's called Rainbow Frosting. So just because I'm not going to be fussy cutting these elephants doesn't mean that I'm not going to pay attention to where they are when I'm cutting my strips. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut my skinny strip first and just kind of line that up there. That way, when I cut my large strip, it's going to be going over this entire elephant, and I'll be more likely to get him in one of my triangles. So now when I line this up, I'm going to have an entire elephant almost in here, and I'm more likely to get him included in one of my triangles. I'm going to keep kind of judging this as I go. Here I've got a skinny strip lined up, and I can see I'm going to be cutting off a little bit of the top of the elephant, but I would still get a good chunk of it. Whereas if I lined it up to get a big strip here, I'm just going to get tops of elephants, and that's not going to look as good. So I'm going to cut another skinny strip here. And again, this might vary for you if you're cutting at home or if you have different size motifs. All right, I'm going to go ahead and cut that second large strip. Now I have all the large strips I need, so I'm just going to go ahead and cut my remaining skinny strips. So when you're cutting equilateral triangle rulers, it's important to use one for our patterns that have all 3 points, especially this top tip. Many of them don't have that. They have a blunt edge inside instead, and you won't get the same amount of triangles per strip for that, and the pattern won't come out as it should. So make sure it doesn't have to be the clear view like I'm using, but make sure it's got that tip. All right, so first what I'm going to do is I'm going to just square up this edge so I can get that sort of half equilateral triangle for the edges of my quilt. So I'm just using the center line to line up with the top of my strip here, and I'm just going to trim off this side. All right, so now you've got 3 lines here. You've got your center line, and then you also have one on either side of it, and that is a 1/4 inch from the side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line this one here up with the edge, and then I've got an inch line down here. So what this does is I've got the point of this triangle just a 1/4 inch to the side of this, and that'll be our seam allowance that gets caught into the binding. So once I'm satisfied where everything is, I'm going to go ahead and give that a trim. So I've got my half equilateral triangle right here, and that can be used for the sides. And so now I'm going to flip it upside down, and I've got the point of my triangle on the very bottom of the strip. My edge is even with that edge I just cut, and then I've got my top line here even with the top, and you can see I'm going to get a good chunk of this elephant. You know, I'm not fussy cutting this, but you're going to see a good chunk of him, and he's going to look pretty good. All right, once I'm happy, I can go ahead and give it a trim. Move that over. And then we're just going to keep flipping it up and down. Again, making sure we're lining up our inch line with the bottom and the left edge with the edge that we just cut. And then the tip of the triangle is going to be even with the tip up there. All right, go ahead and give that a trim. And you're just going to keep on going all the way down. When you get down to the very end like this, we need to create the opposite version of this to go on the other side of your row. So what you're going to do is you're going to line up the edge of one of these straight lines, and then you're going to get that 1/4 inch mark at the bottom of the ruler even with the tip of that triangle. And then once you've got everything where it needs to be, you're going to give it a little slice, get a little bit extra bit there, and then you have parts for the beginning and the end of your row. All right, so I already showed you guys how to cut with the large fat strips. Now I'm going to show you guys how to piece together the skinny strips so that they end up being the same width as the fat strip. So on the woven pieces, there is no right or wrong side, so that part, it really doesn't matter what size you work with. But with these, what I'm going to do is just flip these guys right sides together. And usually whenever I'm strip piecing with fat quarters, I just make sure that my selvage edges are lined up. That way I've got nice usable edge all the way to the edge there. I'm going to go ahead and set my sewing machine up to sew a 1/4 inch stitch, and then usually when I'm strip piecing, I'll go ahead and pop my needle position 1 needle width to the right, so it's just that scant 1/4 inch seam. That way if I get a little bored and get off a little bit, it's okay, and I'll still end up with things that are the right size at the end. Now what I do is I just line up whatever will fit on the sewing machine throat, and then I will just put a finger down and sew with the edge of the fabric, even with the edge of my presser foot here. And then when my finger just gets pulled all the way up to the front, then I just reline everything up one more time and repeat. You don't ever really want to pull on your fabric. You want to let the feed dogs pull that through, and that will give you nice good tension and have everything come out real nicely when you're all done. When you get to the end, you can just go ahead and grab your next two pieces, put them right sides together. Then just go ahead and lift that up, and you can chain piece all these together to help you save thread and time. Now I really love to press my seams open, especially when I'm doing equilateral triangles, because it really helps you have a really great point that is nice and flat when you have all those triangle points come together. So what you're going to do is you're just going to put the tip of your iron straight down the center of your seam like that. And then I usually put at least 3 to 4 fingers on the seam ahead of me, and I'm just going to go ahead and press that open, and that kind of just sort of opens it up a little bit ahead of your iron and makes it easier to press that nice and flat. One thing you want to look for is to make sure that this is nice and straight. Sometimes you'll end up with little wiggles on the back where it just looks like a little, you know, worm just wiggled its way through there. And if you see that, that means that you've got a pleat on the other side and it's not going to turn out the right side. So you need to make sure that you get that figured out before you go any further. The other thing I like to do to get this really nice and flat is I like to just give it a press from the right side as well. And I just go straight down that center seam to make it nice and flat. All right, so now that we've got these pieces together, we need to cut these into equilateral triangles the same way we did with our larger pieces, the fat ones, but we're going to go ahead and do just one extra thing to make sure that it stays nice and parallel. So this time when I cut off my selvage edges, I'm going to go ahead and put that center line down that seam so I can keep everything nice and straight. Then I'm going to go ahead and line it up with that line that's just to the left of the center line, so that way I can have my extra piece. Now we're not going to use the pieced ones in this design, but you can always save the extras. You have plenty to make a coordinating throw pillow, or if you'd like to do piece backs, you could use it for that as well. They're really kind of fun to have and do something fun with. Now when I flip this over, I'm going to pay attention to a couple of extra things. I'm going to make sure that my halfway mark, in this case it's the 2-inch line, is right on that seam line. And so I want to make sure that I'm got it where I cut it, and my point is at the bottom, and then I've got that dead center, so that way that line's going to be nice and parallel. Go ahead and give that a trim. And then we're just going to keep on going the same way we did before. Just we're paying attention to one extra thing, and that's that line there is right down the center of your piece. So when you are arranging your fabrics, it's really important to arrange them in color groups of 3 that look good together. And then that's what you're going to use when you are arranging your rows for both your larger, full equilateral triangles, and then when you are putting together your pieced ones. So here you can see that I've got 1, 2, 3 colors or 3 fabrics, and then it repeats on one of these, and which one repeats is going to vary depending on how you arrange and sew everything together. But this way you're going to have those peaks will turn out, so that way you can see one entire color family together, and then it will change when it comes to the next diamond that sits below that. And so that's what creates that cool color change and that variety of color that makes this quilt so fun. But what you want to make sure you don't do is like have it be all orange here and then maybe like all pink or purple here, because then it's just going to cut off straight across the bottom, and then it just doesn't look as cool anymore because you don't have that peak of color change. It's just a straight line, and that's boring. So we want to be fun and adventurous. All right, so what I'm going to do here is you're just going to flip these guys right sides together, and we're just going to sew them straight down that center bit. And occasionally when I do this, I'll lay them down and I'll get my points aligned here, and they won't line up perfectly at the tip. They'll be off by as much of a 1/4 inch sometimes. And don't worry about that. I have never had a problem where they've been a little off, where they've been off a little bit up here, but they're in line with the points, where I haven't been able to get the quilt to lay flat. If they're like super off, like 1/2 inch or so, then something probably went wrong somewhere. But if they are just offset just a tiny bit, like say you get your points lined up down there, but this top one is off just a smidge, you're probably going to be just fine, so don't worry about it. We are sewing on the bias, so that can be a scary word, but it also can be your friend because it means we can get away with a little bit more. I'm going to go ahead and turn my sewing machine back to that regular 1/4 inch stitch instead of that scant. And I'm going to go ahead and grab these. All I ever do is I just kind of line up my points and get them right on top of each other. If you wanted to, you certainly could pin. Do whatever makes you feel comfortable, but you also can just line that up. As long as you've done a really good job cutting, they should be exactly where they should be, and you shouldn't have too much variation in your size. What I do is I just line those points up on top of each other, and I put my pointer finger on top. I let that go all the way up. And then when I can't hold on to that anymore, I just shift my pointer finger to the left of that presser foot, and that helps me maintain that 1/4 inch stitch all the way to the end of the block. All right, so now we're going to grab the other one and we're going to chain stitch these. That's going to save you thread and time. So I'm going to press these open as well. This is very, very important to press open for a couple of reasons. One, you're going to get that super flat join with points that are just fabulous, and two, it's going to have these dog ears pointing out, and that's going to be very, very useful when it comes to lining up your rows to get nice perfect points and perfect joins. So this is also how you would sew together your large non-piece equilateral triangles to make diamonds as well. Basically, one row is going to be the large ones and the alternating row is going to be the pieced ones, and it just sort of creates nice fun joins, and then you don't have any seams to match within the rows. You're just working on you know, getting your points right, and that's all you have to mess with. So you're also going to sew together those half equilateral triangles, and that's going to be your end piece. So this is going to be on the end of my row, and it's going to just kind of hang out down here for a little bit. So this is the block, essentially. You're going to have either a pieced one or equilateral triangle or a whole equilateral triangle, and they're just going to alternate like that. Pieced, whole, pieced, and so on. And on the top and bottom, so whatever colors you choose for the very top and bottom of your quilt, pay attention because some of those are not going to get sewn together. They're going to remain just as equilateral triangle, so you have a nice flat top and a flat bottom to your quilt. All right, so when we sew this together, it's going to get sewed together on the diagonal, which sounds scary, but it isn't. It is pretty easy once you break it down. I've already sewn this one together. I've sewn it all the way here, and then I added my little corner piece on up there. It is helpful to lay this out on a spare bed or a design wall so you can get everything the way you want it and know that you like the placement of everything. Like, for example, I wouldn't want one, I made sure that like this print was on the bottom here, so that way it wasn't, you know, looking like it was in the same spot. And like these sort of dusty purples are an alternating spot so that the eye is moving around a lot. You don't want your eye to be drawn to any one section because you put like 3 of the same block right in a row. So keep in mind of that when you're going on. So I'm going to go ahead and move this to the side for just a second. And I'm going to show you how I line this up. So what I do is once I figure out my row, I just flip them right sides together like this. And you can see here that we've got 2 points. So I can take that dog ear that was created when we pressed it open, and I can line it up with the point from the diamond underneath it. And then you're going to want this to come out so that it extends beyond the fabric here. And basically the tip of this is going to be about even with the tip of your dog ear from below. So don't cut those off. They can be really useful when it comes to putting everything together. So this is how it's going to look for those half ones. For your whole ones, this is just a little bit weird when you first start doing it, but it makes total sense when you get going. So what you're going to do is when you flip it right sides together, you end up creating where it's going in opposite directions. So we've got the one below is going to the top, and then one is going to the bottom. And then you're just going to line up your point with your dog ear up here, and your other point with your dog ear down here. Now, if you've sewn everything together correctly, when you go to sew this little valley right where these come together should be a 1/4 inch away from the edge. So you should be able to sew from that little valley all the way down to this little valley, and it should work out just fine. Now we do have one oddball piece. We have an odd number in this row, so this top one is going to get sewn together last. But what I like to do is get everything flipped together, and then I just stack them on top of each other with the edge that I'm supposed to sew to my right, and that's because I grab this and I bring it to my sewing machine so I don't have to flip anything around, because that's when I'm going to screw something up if I have to keep switching and moving things around. So I just grab the whole stack, I bring it to my sewing machine, and then I go from there. Now you can pin this if you want. You also can just sew it. And so just, you know, maybe make one, see how it turns out. And if you feel like you need a pin, then do it. And if you feel like you don't need to, then you'll get done that much faster. So since I don't pin, I always take a little bit of time to get everything nice and lined up before I put it underneath my sewing machine with my fingers. I'm just gonna go ahead and start sewing. And then once I've got that first part pinned together, I just arrange it so that my dog ear is right over the point from the diamond below it. And then I'm gonna go ahead and sew. Do make sure that in instances where you've got the piecing below, that you're making sure that that's laying nice and flat as you're going underneath it and over your feed dogs. You don't want that to get flipped from one side to the other, because then your quilt won't be as flat as it should be. All right, so I'm getting everything nice and lined up here. Then I'm gonna slide that underneath and chain piece this. Get a little bit in, again, line that dog ear up with the diamond below. And then I also feel right here, so I can feel that that seam is nice and flat. And then I just hold the finger over that so that it doesn't get flipped over when I'm going to over those feed dogs. And again, when I get to the end, I just slow down and I put my finger to the left of that so I can maintain that quarter and stitch all the way down. Then what I do, once I get these guys all taken apart, is I go ahead and I just lay them right on top of my previous one. So I've got this guy here and this guy here, and they're all orientated in the same way that they originally were, to where I can pick it up and go over to my sewing machine. And then I can grab the one below it and I can line that up. So you notice I haven't pressed yet. I like to do that at the very end because I feel it's more efficient and I can get the row done faster that way, and I'm less likely to get something in the wrong direction. All right, so now I'm just gonna hold this guy up. I'm gonna arrange that point with that dog ear and start sewing. Again, once I get about an inch in or so, I'm gonna go ahead and line up again. And in this one, I've got a little bit wider space here than I do on the one below. You can see that there's a little bit of fabric just popping up there. So since this is on the bias, you can give it just a little bit of tension. You don't want to pull it like really tight, but just enough to where it's nice and flat. And then it will kind of just go back to where it should be in the very end, because it is on the bias, so that can be your friend. You can kind of manipulate the fabric a little bit more and it'll still lie flat. All right, so now I've got part of my row together, and I'm going to go ahead and line that up again. And this time I'm lining up the points here with that point, and then the dog ear again with the bottom point. It's not that different than when you were doing it with the diamond, because you're still lining up a point to a dog ear. Just a little different as you're going through it. So we're going to press these seams open too, but you do have to be a little bit more careful because we have a lot of other seams in here that we don't want to press going the wrong direction. So I'm doing a lot of lifting of the iron and then setting it down, that way I don't accidentally push something going the wrong way and then have to repress it. Now when I'm all done, I'd like to use my favorite non-quilting quilting tool, and that is this spray mister. I just have water in it. You can put spray starch in it as well. But what I do is I just spray it, and it's nice because it turns any liquid into an aerosol mist. So you don't get those water droplets. It's just a nice little mist that comes out. You can get that at beauty supply stores or Amazon. And then what I like to do is just give it one more press. I don't like to put water in my Oliso. I'm worried that, you know, every iron I've ever had before this one has always leaked eventually, and I don't want that to happen with this one because it's fabulous and I love it. And this sort of gets you that nice flat press without having to use that steam. So now I've got super flat joints and we're ready to join our rows together, and I'm going to show you a fabulous tip that you want to use for all your triangles going forward to get perfect joints every time. All right, so I've got my two pieces. I've got my corner piece that I already sewed together in the row we just did here. And for all the rows, they go together just like I showed you, just there's gonna be more and more diamonds, and then eventually there'll be less and less diamonds as you work your way from one corner to the quilt to the other. All right, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna flip these guys right sides together. And I'm going to show you this to you right here because we have 3 different fabrics coming together, and you can see that they make like this little triangle. And so what you want to do is you want to put your pin right in where all of those come together, and that's where that point is going to be on your other side. Then you can see that there's the same thing right here. We've got this fabric, and this fabric meeting, and there's a little point there. And so I want to put my pin in through that join as well. Now I'm going to pinch that so that my needle is going, or my pin is going straight up and down. And in this instance, those little dog ears are lining up right on top of each other. That doesn't always happen. So do not get thrown off if your dog ears are not on top of each other. What matters is that that pin is going straight up and down so that your points are right on top of each other, because that's what you'll see in the very end. Now, if I were to just rock this pin back and forth and pin it, that's going to move my top fabric forward and my bottom fabric back. And then I won't have my points right on top of each other anymore. So what I do is I take a second pin and I'm going to pin right across that while holding that first pin in place. And so that way I've got my 2 pins. This one is holding everything together, and this one made sure that my points stayed on top of each other. All right, so I'm going to repeat and do that for all my other joins, and that will help keep my points as close together as they possibly can be when we are sewing. And then we should have really good results when we go to sew everything together in the end. All right, so now when you go to sew this, I don't really pin this top part. I'll just line up the point with the dog ear and sew all the way down. And then what you want to do is make sure that you are sewing 1 needle width to the right of where all these joins are coming together, because that will make sure that you don't cut off your point, but that you'll be able to see it clearly come together when you're all done. All right, so I'm just sewing like I did before, making sure that anytime we're strip piecing that's nice and flat. And then I always slow down as I come to those joins. I'm going to make sure that my needle is 1 needle width to the right of where all those joints are. Then I'm going to sew right after that pin and then remove it. You don't want to pull that pin too quickly or everything could shift on you and then you won't have perfect points anymore. All right, make sure I'm nice and lined up. Sew to the next end. Slow down again as I get towards that join so I can make sure that I'm 1 needle width to the right. Pull that pin. And then I'm going to line up these edges here and just sew right off the end. So you can see really clearly here how that stitch line is just to the seam side of where all those points come together. Then when we open this up, you can see that those points came together really, really well. I'm very happy with this join. All right, so just like before, I'm going to press this open. Again, that really contributes to having a really nice and flat seam. I'm going to pay careful attention to where we have all these points coming together. We want to make sure that that is very, very flat. And I'm just lifting and pressing as I make my way down that seam. When I flip it over, I'm going to go ahead and get that spray again. I'm going to get that seam pretty good because I really want it to be nice and flat, and that will help that happen. And now we have very, very flat seams. So when I am quilting this, I can quilt right into that seam without worrying about busting a needle or getting it stuck. It'll just goes in real neatly because you don't have that bulk that you get when you're pressing seams under. Everything stays a little bit more true to size, and these points are just fabulous because they are so flat. I mean, this one, oh my gosh, it is just as good as you can probably get for getting seams together. I mean, look at that. I mean, my goodness, like we have all 6 points are coming together in a fabulous, fabulous way for that join. This one too is also looking very, very good, and it's because we took that time to do the 2 pinning method. Yeah, it takes a little bit longer, but the results are totally worth it. Well, that's all you need to know to make rainbow frosting. Again, this is the fat quarterfied version of rainbow layer cake, which is one of our favorite patterns, but it's sometimes hard to get the same collection in both a jelly roll and a layer cake, a 10-inch layer cake. So we've made it fat quarterfied. We've had to change the sizing just a tad bit, but the overall vision of it is the same. It will be easier to put together because, again, we're going to be alternating those full equilateral triangles with the pieced ones. And it really is just a lot of fun because it's just this riot of color. Be sure to check out Stashin' with Stephanie over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. You can learn all about the program there. It is a great deal because you are going to get, if you stay on it, up to 18 free yards of fabric a year. And it's pretty awesome because you get 2 free fat quarters a month with the way that we priced it. You get a special deal if you're a subscriber. Plus, you're going to get the 12 free patterns plus everything that has been released. The 12 free new patterns, we release one a month, plus everything we released to date, which is over a $200 value at this point. And then you just get lots of goodies. You get first access to stuff like this. And sometimes we do sell out before we even post the videos up we did last month. So super fun program, super fun to do. But if you just want to get the pattern and a kit while it's available, you can do that as well over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. You can also like and subscribe here on YouTube and on our email newsletter over on our website, and that will help you stay informed and know when we have the latest tutorials out. Thanks so much. Until next week, happy quilting.